Joe Hill's short story was interesting to me because it combined a serial killer story with a ghost story, which I'd never seen done before. But I also thought it was an interesting opportunity to make a scary horror film that still had a lot of empathy and heart and almost inspiration because it's a true coming-of-age story. And when I thought about combining that with my own memories of growing up in North Denver in 1978, I thought there was an interesting film to be made, and that's how this movie came about. Yeah, they're both remarkable. The bond between the two of them is the soul of the movie. You learn very quickly in the film, in the first half hour, how and why they're so connected, because they live in a dangerous world. They live in a world where there's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of bullying. They live in a violent household where their alcoholic father is abusive, but they've got each other, and they really look out for each other. And so when the separation occurs because of this abduction by this monstrous figure, the bond still exists between them, and that becomes the source of hope that sustains the film. Well, the grabber's very mysterious. We don't get into his backstory. To me, the best villains, like Heath Ledger's the Joker or Hannibal Lecter, these are characters who very little about. Bits and pieces, but you certainly don't ever get any scene or any story that explains why they are so monstrous. So I think there's an element of mystery to them, but I think in the case of the grabber, his actions are so abhorrent, what it is that we know he does. I think his need to wear a mask, his need to hide himself, but also to have collected these masks or built these masks that allow for partial reveals at times is really interesting. And I think that most importantly, this ritualistic pattern that he has for abducting his victims and putting them through a period of time of breaking them down with these things that he does is really harrowing. And that allowed Ethan, I think, to create a manner of speaking, a manner of expressing, a manner of emoting that's very, very unique. And I felt like he took the story on wholeheartedly and came to set with an understanding of the grabber that certainly superseded my understanding of him. I mean, I wrote the words and I gave him the masks, but how he speaks, how he gesticulates, how he moves, where he stands, all of these things were things that Ethan knew how to do. And the result is, I think, a pretty memorable villain. Yeah, it is, and I think the supernatural, certainly in the films that I've made, works in conjunction with grounded realism. The more grounded and realistic a movie feels, the more powerful the supernatural is when you start to slide it in. And I think the idea of this phone that is ultimately a conduit to the dead, to speaking with the dead, is really interesting. That all goes back to Joe's short story also. And I think there's something about integrating the paranormal, the supernatural, the horrific with the ordinary, everyday elements of life that's also particularly scary. There's something about it being about a simple black phone being a vehicle to speak to the dead that's inherently chilling. After we wrapped the movie, my house, my house I had lived in for years, burned down in the Southern California fire in 2018. So I'd been living in an apartment. I lived in an apartment while I shot the black phone. And when I got home, I bought a house for the first time in years. And my first night staying there, I was in the living room and a phone rang in the basement. It's a very dark, dank, dirt floor basement. And I was upset, obviously, but I, went down with a flashlight and there was a black phone on the wall that was ringing. And I went and answered it, and it was Jason Blum. And that guy managed to get somebody to install a black phone in my basement without me knowing it, and then called me on it. And he has it set to where if I just pick the phone up, it just automatically dials his cell phone. So it's still there. I kept it. Yeah, he made Sinister. That was pretty early on in the Blumhouse history, but he made Sinister, and he let me do exactly what I wanted to do. He's very protective of me as a director in both Sinister and Black Phone, he never made me do anything I didn't want to do. He always got me what I needed for the films, and I think his attitude, at least in my experience on both movies, was whatever it is that you need as a filmmaker, I'm going to trust you and I'm going to make sure that you have it. And in both cases, I delivered a film that he was very happy with and very proud of. And I'll also say this, Jason's just a great guy. You know, he's my closest friend in this business, and he and I confide in each other personally about a lot of things. He's every bit the good guy you want somebody like him to be.